Robert Louis Stevenson. Treasure Island. Chapter 1. The Old Sea Dog at the Admiral Benbow. Squire Trelawney, Dr. Livesey, and the other gentlemen asked me to write all the details about Treasure Island, from the beginning to the end. I must not hide anything except the exact position of the island, because there is still treasure there. So I take my pen in the year 17 and go back to the time when my father kept the Admiral Benbow Inn, and the old brown sailor with the saber cut first stayed with us. I remember him as if it was yesterday. He walked slowly to the inn door, and his sea chest came behind him on a small cart. He was a tall, strong, heavy man with brown skin. His tarred pigtail fell over the shoulder of his dirty blue coat. His hands were rough and full of scars, with black, broken nails. There was a dirty, pale white scar from a saber across one cheek. I remember he looked around the bay and whistled to himself. Then he began to sing an old sea song that he later sang very often. 15 men on the dead man's chest. Yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. His voice was high, old, and shaking, as if it had been used too much at sea. Then he knocked on the door with a piece of stick he carried. When my father came, he asked roughly for a glass of rum. When he got it, he drank it slowly, like a man who enjoys good drink. He took his time, tasting it, and still looked around at the cliffs and up at our sign. "This is a useful cove," he said at last, "and a pleasant sitiated grog shop. Much company, mate?" My father told him no, there were very few customers, and that was a pity. "Well then," he said, "this is the place for me. Here you," he called to the man with the cart, "bring it here and help me with my chest. I will stay here for a while," he continued. "I am a simple man. Rum and bacon and eggs are what I want, and that hill up there to watch ships. What you mought call me? You mought call me captain. Oh, I see what you are doing. There." And he threw 3 or 4 gold coins on the ground. "You can tell me when I have used all that," he said, looking as strict as a commander. And even though his clothes were bad and he spoke roughly, he did not look like a common sailor. He looked more like an officer or a captain who was used to giving orders and being obeyed. The man who brought the cart told us that the mail coach had left him the day before at the Royal George. He said the man had asked about inns along the coast. When he heard good things about ours and that it was quiet, he chose it to stay. And that was all we could learn about our guest. He was usually a very quiet man. All day he walked around the cove or on the cliffs with a brass telescope. All evening he sat in a corner of the room near the fire and drank very strong rum and water. Most of the time, he did not speak when someone spoke to him. He only looked up suddenly and angrily and blew through his nose like a foghorn. We and the people who came to our house soon learned to leave him alone. Every day when he came back from his walk, he asked if any sailors had passed along the road. At first we thought he asked because he missed people like himself. But later we began to see that he wanted to avoid them. When a sailor did come to the Admiral Benbow, sometimes they did, traveling along the coast road to Bristol, he would look at him through the door before going into the room. And he was always as quiet as a mouse when such a man was there. For me, there was no secret about it, because I was in a way part of his fear. One day he took me aside and promised me a silver 4-penny coin on the first day of every month, if I would keep my weather eye open for a seafaring man with one leg, and tell him as soon as I saw him. Often, when the first day of the month came and I asked for my money, he only blew through his nose at me and looked at me hard. But before the week ended, he always changed his mind, gave me my 4-penny coin, and repeated his order to watch for the seafaring man with one leg. I do not need to tell you how much this person appeared in my dreams. On stormy nights, when the wind shook the whole house and the sea roared along the cove and up the cliffs, I saw him in many forms and with many terrible faces. Sometimes his leg was cut off at the knee, sometimes at the hip. Sometimes he was a terrible creature who had only one leg, and that leg was in the middle of his body. Seeing him jump and run and chase me over fields and ditches was the worst nightmare. Altogether, I paid a high price for my monthly 4-penny coin, in the form of these horrible dreams. But even though I was so afraid of the idea of the seafaring man with one leg, I was much less afraid of the captain himself than the other people who knew him. There were nights when he drank much more rum and water than he could handle. Then he would sometimes sit and sing his bad, old, wild sea songs and not care about anyone. But sometimes he called for drinks for everyone and forced all the frightened people to listen to his stories or to sing with him. I often heard the house shaking with yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum, while all the neighbors joined in as loud as they could, afraid for their lives. Each person sang louder than the others so that the captain would not notice them, because in these moments he was the most controlling man anyone had ever seen. He hit the table with his hand to make everyone quiet. He became very angry if someone asked a question, or sometimes if no one asked anything, because then he thought people were not listening to his story. And he did not allow anyone to leave the inn until he had drunk so much that he became sleepy and went unsteadily to bed. His stories frightened people more than anything else. They were terrible stories, about hangings, about making men walk the plank, about storms at sea, about the dry Tortugas, and about wild actions in places on the Spanish Main. From what he said, he must have lived among some of the most wicked men that ever sailed the sea. The words he used when he told these stories shocked our simple country people almost as much as the crimes themselves. My father often said the inn would be ruined because people would stop coming if they were treated badly and sent to bed shaking with fear. But I believe his presence actually helped us. People were afraid at the time, but later they liked it. It was an exciting change in a quiet country life. Some of the younger men even said they admired him. They called him a true sea dog and a real old salt and similar names, and they said that men like him made England strong and feared at sea. In one way, however, he almost ruined us. He stayed week after week and then month after month. All his money was gone long before, but my father never found the courage to ask him for more. If my father ever mentioned it, the captain would blow through his nose so loudly that it sounded like a roar, and he would stare at my poor father until he left the room. I saw my father twist his hands in worry after this happened, and I am sure that the stress and fear made his illness worse and caused his early and unhappy death. During all the time he stayed with us, the captain never changed his clothes, except to buy some stockings from a traveling seller. One side of his hat had fallen down, and he let it stay like that, even though it was annoying when the wind blew. I remember his coat, which he repaired himself in his room upstairs. In the end, it was only made of patches. He never wrote or received any letters, and he spoke only with the neighbors, and mostly only when he was drunk. None of us had ever seen him open his large sea chest. He was only opposed once, and that was near the end, when my poor father was very ill and close to death. Dr. Livesey came one afternoon to see him. He ate a small meal with my mother and then went into the parlor to smoke his pipe while he waited for his horse to come from the nearby village, because we had no stable at the old Benbow. I followed him into the room, and I remember how different the neat and clean doctor looked. His hair was powdered white like snow, and he had bright black eyes and kind manners. He was very different from the rough country people, and especially from our dirty, heavy, and half-blind pirate, who sat there very drunk, with his arms on the table. Suddenly he, the captain I mean, began to sing his usual song. 15 men on the dead man's chest. Yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. Drink and the devil had done for the rest. Yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. At first I thought that the dead man's chest was the same big box he kept upstairs in the front room. This idea was mixed in my nightmares with the one-legged seafaring man. But by this time we had all stopped paying much attention to the song. That night it was new only to Dr. Livesey. I saw that he did not like it. He looked up for a moment, quite angry, before he continued talking to old Taylor, the gardener, about a new cure for rheumatism. At the same time, the captain became more cheerful because of his own music. At last he hit the table with his hand, which we all knew meant silence. The voices stopped at once, except for Dr. Livesey. He continued speaking as before, in a clear and kind voice, and calmly smoked his pipe between his words. The captain stared at him for a while, hit the table again, and looked even more angry. At last he shouted with a low, ugly curse, "Silence there, between decks!" "Were you speaking to me, sir?" said the doctor. When the rude man answered, with another curse, that he was, the doctor replied, "I have only one thing to say to you, sir. If you continue drinking rum, the world will soon be free of a very dirty scoundrel." The old man became terribly angry. He jumped to his feet, took out a sailor's knife, opened it, and held it ready in his hand. He threatened to pin the doctor to the wall. The doctor did not move at all. He spoke as before, over his shoulder and in the same tone of voice. It was a little loud so everyone could hear, but it was calm and steady. "If you do not put that knife in your pocket at once, I promise, on my honor, that you will hang at the next court." Then they looked at each other like enemies, but the captain soon gave up. He put away his knife and sat down again, grumbling like a beaten dog. "And now, sir," continued the doctor, "now that I know there is such a man in my area, I will watch you day and night. I am not only a doctor, I am also a magistrate. If I hear even the smallest complaint about you, even for something as small as your bad behavior tonight, I will take strong action to have you caught and removed from this place. That is enough." Soon after, Dr. Livesey's horse came to the door, and he rode away. But the captain stayed quiet that evening, and for many evenings after.